of standard costing, that is the difference between standard costing and budgetary control. And second point is the advantages and limitations of standard costing. So dear students, first of all, let's try to understand what is the exact difference between the standard costing and budgetary control. As you know, budgeting is one such device which helps the management to understand the business programs in their right perspective and take steps to achieve business objectives. Budgeting means simply planning for future. Budgeting involves preparation of departmental budgets, budgetary control and related issues. The budgetary control is basically concerned with management of business activities with the help of budgets. In this way, budget it serves its purpose of controlling device. Both, that is standard costing and budgetary control, both of these techniques assumes that costs are controllable and have the same object, that is controlling the business operation by establishment of predetermined standards with the object of cost reduction. Budgetary control is usually operated without standard costing, but it is difficult to implement the standard costing system effectively without some degree of budgetary control. A system of budgetary control in conjunction with the standard costing is more helpful. In this way, both are interrelated, but they are not interdependent. Budgets are indices, adherence to which keep a business out of possible difficulties, whereas standards are the indicators to further possible improvement. Despite of these similarities, the basic principles, there are differences between the two in its scope and techniques. The difference between the standard costing and budgetary control can be stated as like standard costing. Standard costing is based upon the technical assessment. Technical assessment means here the data related with the material, labor and expenses, they are being collected and the forecast is being made. So therefore it is called as a technical assessment. But as far as budgetary controls are concerned, budgetary controls are based on the past actual adjustment to the future trends. It means whatever happened in the past, that base has to be taken into account for to predict the future trends. So that is the basic difference between the standard costing and budgetary control. Standards are mainly for production expenses, that is in standard costing we use to compute the material, labor and expenses. But as far as budgets are concerned, budgets are products of the financial accounts. It means budgets are prepared based on the financial data which is being prepared or given or produced by the finance accounts. Standards are minimum targets which are to be attained. It means when standards are set, these standards are to be at least it should be achieved or attained. But as far as budgets are concerned, they are the maximum limit of expenses above which expenditure should not be incurred. It means when we decide the standard cost, our cost can go beyond the standards, but as far as budgets are concerned, we cannot make an expenses more than the whatever we have decided in the budgets. Standards are pointers to further improvement, because once you set the standard, it means that you have to adhere, you have to just be in line with the standards, and therefore it will be give you a direction for the future improvement. But as far as budgets are concerned, they are the indices which we should adherence to keep a business out of problems. Once you are following your budget, it means that you are not having any sort of problems because everything is under the control. So that is the basic motto of budgetary control. Standard costs are the plan under a specific assumed condition of production performance. Here, whenever standards are set, they are set under a specific condition. And therefore, production performance can be compared. But as far as budgets are concerned, they are expected costs which are used for future or forecasting profits, because based on the budget you can just have a forecast, you can just make a judgment that that amount of profit can be attainable. And whenever you are trying to express the standards are always expressed in terms of unit of production. But as far as budgets are concerned, budgets are expressed in total amount. In standard costing, detailed analysis is needed in case of prices, whether they are favorable or unfavorable. Here, as far as standard costs are concerned, here the actual performance is compared with the budgeted or the standard performances, so that whether your performance is favorable, that is acceptable, or unacceptable, that can be decided. But as far as budgets are concerned, in budget we are not making any sort of further analysis if costs are within the budget, because if you are doing an expenses or making an expenses within the budgetary limit, then there is no need of making the further analysis. As far as standard cost is concerned, variances are accounted for in the books. It means whatever the difference is there in the actual and budgeted, that will be recorded in the books. But as far as budgetary control is concerned, variance analysis is only for statistical data, that is whether your activities are as per plan or not. So standard cost is concerned with the certainment and control of cost. Here, the basic motto of standard cost is to know how much would be the cost of a product. But as far as budgetary control is concerned, here overall profitability and financial position of the concern is being taken into account. Standard costing is more intensive in nature and budgetary control is more extensive in nature, because its core standard costing cannot be introduced without a proper budgetary control system. It means to have a standard costing, we should have the budgetary control system. Unless and until we should follow the budgetary control, we cannot able to attain the objectives of the standard costing. But as far as budgetary control system is concerned, it is operated without the standard costing. It means for budgetary control, standard costing is not necessary. But as far as standard costing is concerned, budgetary control is the necessity of the standard costing. Standard costing cannot be applied in part. It means you have to apply the standard costing in full. But whereas budgetary control systems are concerned, they may be applied in partial or in a comprehensive manner. And the last point for the difference between the standard costing and the budgetary control is the standard costing gives more emphasis on what should be the cost, whereas budgetary control, it gives emphasis on the level of cost not to be exceeded. It means your cost should not exceed this particular level. That is the basic idea in the budgetary control. But whereas in standard costing, the more focus is given on how much and what should be the cost of a product. Now let's move on to the second point of today's discussion, and that is advantages and limitations of standard costing. As far as advantages are concerned, the advantages to be derived from a system of standard costing, it will be vary from one business to another business, because it depends upon the degree of sophistication achieved and the acceptance by the management of utility of the system. The possible advantages of standard costing techniques, we can say the first advantage is the effective cost control. The most important advantage of standard costing is that it facilitates control of cost. Control is exercised by comparing the actual performances with the standards and taking action on the basis of variances so revealed. Second objective we can say is help in planning. Standard costing establishes standard, which is very useful exercise in business planning, which instills the management a habit of thinking in advance. Provides incentive. The standard provide incentives and motivate to work with a grateful efforts. Schemes may be formulated to reward those who achieve or surpass the standard. This increases the efficiency and productivity of a worker. Fixing price and formulating policies. Standard costs are a valuable aid to management in determining prices and formulating production policies. For example, prices may be fixed by adding a standard margin of profit in standard cost. Similarly, standard costing furnishes cost estimates while planning production of a new product. Next advantage is facilitates delegation of authority. In order that responsibility for of standard performance may be identified directly with the person concerned, an organizational chart is prepared which shows delegation of authority and establishes the responsibility of each of the executive. Next advantage is facilitates coordination. When establishing the standard, the performance of different departments such as production, sales, purchase, etc. all these departments' performance is taken into account. Thus, standard costing facilitates coordination between the different functions of different departments. Eliminate waste. By fixing the standard, certain waste such as material wastage, idle time, loss of machine hours, etc. are to be reduced. Valuation of stock. Standard costing simplifies the valuation of stock because stock is valued at standard cost. The difference between the standard and actual is transferred to a variance account. This ensures a uniform pricing of stock in the form of raw materials, work in progress, and finished goods. Next advantage is management by exception. Reporting of variances is based on principle of management by exception. Only variances beyond a predetermined limit may be considered by the management for corrective action. This also reduces the cost of preparing reports. Economical and simple. Standard costing is an economical and simple mean of cost accounting and generally results in a saving in cost of costing system. It results in reduction in paperwork in accounting and needs lesser number of forms and records. This lead to a considerable saving in clerical labor. Facilitates cost audit. Standard costing facilitates cost audit since if variances are satisfactorily explained, the accuracy of costing can be safely assumed. It also provides forward-looking approach. By adopting the standard costing system, the whole concern is imbued with a dynamic forward-looking mentality. It also provides objective measurement of operational efficiency. Standard costing, through setting of standards, enables to measure the operational efficiency of workers and other material of the staff objectively against those standards. Creates cost conscientiousness. Standard costing creates cost conscientiousness among executives, which increases efficiency and productivity. Hence, we can say the entire success of cost accounting system is depend upon the extent of responsibility which the top management assume in correcting the conditions which causes variances from standards. Now we are moving on to the next point, and that is the limitations of standard costing. In order to reap the maximum benefit of standard costing, the costing department should keep the following point in their mind, because these can be considered as precautions to be taken while implementing standard costing technique. If organization fail to take note of these, the same will act as limitations. The following are the points of limitations that are attached to the standard costing system. First is, it is very costly system because the standard costing requires highly skillful competent personnel. It becomes costly system too. For the same, Experts are paid high remuneration. Second limitation is difficulties in fixation of standard. Standard costing always difficult to determine precise standard cost in a given situation, which will which will coincide with actual cost when operations are over. Standard costs are determined partly by the past experiences and partly by the cost projections based on advanced statistical techniques. Thus, uncertainties revolve around standards. Constraint for service industry. Standard costing is applied for planning and controlling manufacturing cost. Thus, it cannot be applied in a service industry. Consistency of standard. Because the standards of marginal costing fluctuate and vary time to time, it is difficult to always sustain and continue the same standards. Unsuitable for non-standardized product. Standard costing system is expensive and unsuitable for job manufacturing industries as they are manufacturing non-standardized product such as catering, tailoring, printing, etc. Relatively fixed standards. A business may not be able to keep standards up to date. In other words, a business may not revise standards to keep pace with the frequent changes in manufacturing conditions. Firms may avoid revising standards as it is costly affair. Difficult for small industries. Establishment of standards and their implementation involve initial high cost. Standards have to be revised and new standards are to be fixed involving larger costs. Thus, small firms find it expensive to operate standard costing system. This system is not fit for each type of industries. Discouragement for workers. Sometimes the employees and workers are discouraged when the standards are fixed at a high level. The unreal high standards may adverse by affect the morale of the worker rather than working in an incentive for better efficiency. And the last point is inaccurate diverse results. Inaccurate and unreliable standards cause misleading results and thus may not enjoy confidence of the users of this system. And therefore, I can say that for each and every system, there are certain advantages and disadvantages. It is depend upon the organization's management how they are taking this system into account. So dear students, this was all about today's 2 points. One, we have studied the difference between standard costing and budgetary control, and second point we have studied is the advantages and limitations of standard costing. I request you all, if you have any sort of queries or problem regarding this presentation, you can just message me or you can contact me. Thank you for your patience listening.